A lot of people underestimate just how much the Soviet Union contributed to the technological revolution of the 20th century. The Soviets ignited the space race. They built the first orbital rocket that led humanity's way into Earth orbit and beyond. But they didn't stop there. That was only the beginning of a decades-long story that saw nuclear missiles become spaceships. It would lead the Soviets to build the biggest and most powerful rockets the world had ever seen. There would be glorious success. There would be explosive failure. And all of it framed by the rise and fall of a global superpower. These are the rockets that the Soviet Union built along the way. A story of human space exploration. A beginning, but not necessarily an end. These rockets are not done yet. First, we have to talk about the R-7, also known as Semyorka, easily the most important rocket in Soviet and Russian history. There's a case to be made that this is the most important rocket in the entire history of space exploration. It was there at the beginning, and it is still launching people into orbit today. As you can probably tell from the name, this was the seventh in a series. The R stands for Raketa, rocket in Russian, and these designs actually began as long-range missiles in the 1940s. The Soviet R-1 was a direct copy of the German V-2 ballistic missile. It was good, but Joseph Stalin wanted better. And in 1953, the Soviets begin development of the R-7. This is more than just another weapon of war. It's destined to become the world's first intercontinental ballistic missile. A machine with truly awesome power and the capability to fly over thousands of miles, carrying a 3-ton nuclear warhead. This was a rocket that could end the world. Not to say that the Soviets actually wanted to trigger a nuclear apocalypse. They just wanted everyone to know that they could do it. That's the Cold War in a nutshell. Anyway, to build this monster, the Soviet Union called on two of their greatest engineering minds. One was Sergei Korolev, the father of the Soviet space program, and a founding father of the entire space race. The other was Valentin Glushko, the engine genius. But here's what most people don't know. These two men hated each other. Glushko had actually denounced Korolev to Stalin's secret police in 1938, sending him to the Gulag for 6 years. Yet here they were, forced to work together on the most important project in Soviet history. What Korolev built was a monster for that time. The R-7 was more like 5 rockets all bundled together. 4 side boosters strapped to a center core, the first time that it had ever been done. And it allowed the R-7 to function as a 2-stage rocket, meaning that you could run all 5 engines at liftoff. Then, once you get above the atmosphere, you drop the side boosters and continue accelerating into space using your core engine as a second stage. This was the most simple way to achieve rocket staging because you don't have to worry about igniting a second engine in midair. But that doesn't mean this was easy. Korolev had to design a system that would perfectly balance all 5 engines from the moment of ignition all the way through the flight path. If any one of those 4 boosters ran just a little too hot or a little too weak, then the entire rocket would be thrown off course. Korolev is maybe best known for the booster separation system he designed for the R-7. They needed to jettison all 4 of the side boosters at exactly the same moment. Again, any unbalance will throw the second stage off course. So what we get is this amazing synchronized ballet of rocketry. After the booster engines cut out, an anchor is released at the base of the rocket that allows the boosters to flare out at the bottom with a hinge at the top. Then, a small thruster at the tip of each booster fires to push off from the core and send them all into a perfectly synchronized backflip. As the boosters fall away, they keep flipping in this perfectly symmetrical cross shape. Something that will forever be known as the Korolev cross, Now, none of this would be possible without some truly amazing engines. And that's where Glushko's genius, despite his personal animosity, came through. To get such a humongous rocket off the ground, they needed a powerful new engine. Glushko had been expanding on the German V2 engine design, making it bigger and more capable. But there's a limit to the physical size of a rocket engine. The bigger combustion chamber means bigger combustion instabilities. And at a certain point, that gets difficult to manage. The engine just tears itself apart. But Glushko had a solution. Instead of building one large combustion chamber, he split the engine into 4 smaller chambers, each with their own nozzle. So it might look like the R7 boosters have 4 engines, but it's actually one engine with 4 nozzles. By distributing the energy across more surface area, this increased the stability and reliability of the rocket. And that is the foundation of the Soviet space program. Luckily for everyone, the R7 was never used as a nuclear missile. And in October 1957, it deployed the first-ever satellite into Earth orbit, Sputnik 1. Then, just 1 month later, it launched the first animal into orbit, Laika the dog, Ryp. Then, in 1961, it launched Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space. Then, Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman. Victory after victory, all riding on the R7. But the Soviets weren't satisfied with just putting stuff into Earth orbit. Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev saw how the world reacted to his nation's dominance over outer space. The Soviets had ignited a space race, and they were winning. But now they had to keep winning. So they aimed for the moon. The first evolution of the R7 design came in 1958. Luna was specifically designed to send a payload to the moon. Luna 2 became the first human object to reach the moon, by crashing into it. Luna 3 photographed the far side for the first time. The Soviets were racking up firsts faster than anyone could keep track. Meanwhile, Glushko was working on his own rocket, Proton. Where Korolev pursued elegance, Glushko chose brute force. Proton used hypergolic fuel, toxic as hell, but it didn't need an ignition source. It would spontaneously combust on contact. This made it simpler, more reliable, but also incredibly dangerous to handle. Then, in 1966, disaster. Korolev died during routine surgery, a botched operation that robbed the Soviet program of its visionary leader. The program stumbled. Soyuz 1 crashed, killing cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov. Soyuz 11's crew died from decompression. The moon suddenly seemed very far away. This brings us to the N1, the Soviet moon rocket. With Korolev dead, the project fell into chaos. The rivalry between design bureaus turned toxic. Glushko refused to build engines for what he saw as Korolev's flawed design. Instead, they used 30 smaller engines on the first stage alone. The result? 4 launches, 4 explosions. The second one was so massive it remains one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. While the N1 was exploding on the pad, Apollo 11 landed on the moon. The race was over. The Soviets had lost. But Glushko wasn't done. In the 1980s, now in charge of the entire program, he built his masterpiece, Energia. This wasn't just a big rocket. It was the most powerful rocket ever successfully flown until SpaceX's Starship. It could lift 100 tons to orbit. It used liquid hydrogen, the fuel Korolev had always wanted, but Glushko had refused to develop while his rival lived. Energia's first flight in 1987 was flawless. Its second flight carried Buran, the Soviet space shuttle, on a perfect automated mission. The system worked beautifully. It represented the absolute peak of Soviet rocket engineering. And then, 4 years later, the Soviet Union collapsed. Energia was cancelled. Buran was abandoned. The mighty Soviet space program was reduced to selling rides on the ancient but reliable Soyuz. They even converted old nuclear missiles, Rocket, Dnipro, into commercial launchers. Fun fact, Elon Musk tried to buy a Dnipro in 2001. They laughed him out of Russia, so he started SpaceX instead. For 20 years, Russia tried to build a new rocket, Angara. It was supposed to replace both Proton and the military missiles. But corruption, budget cuts, and technical problems delayed it again and again. It became a running joke in the industry. Then, finally, in 2024, after literally decades of development, Angara started flying regularly. The Angara A5 can lift 24 tons to orbit. It's not Energia, but it's modern, it's modular, and most importantly, it's Russian-built with no Ukrainian components, a crucial factor given current geopolitics. Russia has announced plans for lunar missions by 2030 using Angara. They're talking about a new super-heavy rocket. Are these realistic? Maybe not. But then again, people said the same thing about the R-7 in 1953. Here's what's remarkable. The RD-191 engine powering Angara is a direct descendant of Glushko's designs from the 1960s. The Soyuz still flying today is Korolev's R-7, modified and improved, but fundamentally the same rocket that launched Sputnik. The Soviet Union is gone, but its rockets aren't. They're in the RD-180 engines that powered American Atlas V rockets for decades. They're in the engineering principles that every space program follows. They're in the crew rotation system of the ISS that relies on Soyuz even today. This is the story of Soviet and Russian rockets, from the R-7 that started it all, through the disasters and triumphs, to today's Angara and tomorrow's ambitions. It's a story of brilliant minds like Korolev and Glushko, whose rivalry both elevated and sabotaged their program. It's a story of engineering that survived purges, collapse, and economic chaos. These rockets changed the world. They turned humanity into a spacefaring species. And despite everything, the failures, the politics, the collapse of empires, they're still flying. Because good engineering transcends ideology. And the rockets that emerged from the Soviet Union? They were very, very good engineering.